Welcome to my YouTube channel. Once upon a time, in the beautiful village of Osasai, known for its vast array of healing herbs, lived a 32-year-old spinster named Jinho and Kem. In her early youth, when she was required by tradition to be married, she had several suitors, but none of them sparked her interest. Despite her beauty, the men did not bother to pursue her further after their first encounter because they felt intimidated by her intelligence. Kem's late father, Egu, was a scholar who sailed around the world in search of knowledge. Every time he returned, he would bring ancient books for her to read and tell her stories about the countries he had visited. When her mother passed away, Egu retired early to care for his daughter. In the confines of their little home, he educated her on many subjects, from the English language to various sciences. "Kem, there is so much to see outside our village," he would say whenever they concluded their conversations. When Egu passed away, Kem felt as though the ground had been pulled from beneath her feet. Egu was not just her father. He was her mentor, her guide, and her closest confidant. Aside from the memories they shared, all she had left were his books, which she immersed herself in daily. As Kem reached the age for marriage, men began to approach her, seeking her hand. Although she was very beautiful, the men soon realized that she was intelligent and curious about the world. When they talked to her, they often felt nervous or inadequate. They would lose interest, seeing her as too smart and independent. "Kem, you are so beautiful," many would say, admiring her. "Thank you," she would reply politely, then she would try to talk about something interesting. "Have you ever noticed how tree branches look like our lungs?" The men would often look confused. No, I haven't," one would reply. "Yes," she would continue excitedly. "It's amazing how nature mimics our bodies, don't you think?" But the suitors would shift uncomfortably, unsure of how to respond. They were used to women who spoke of domestic matters, not science or nature. Kem would smile kindly, but inside, she knew that marriage to these men was out of the question. She was nothing like the mothers, who were expected to know little and remain submissive. As she grew older, she surrendered to her fate of remaining unmarried. Kem decided to spend her days educating the younger generation of all she knew. Most mothers prevented their female children from attending her lectures. "Do you want to remain unmarried like her? She'll teach you all that nonsense that will never be useful." The men would concur, saying, "We need women who can run a household, not discuss books and foreign lands." But Kem didn't care about what they said because she was content with her life. One sunny day, Kem was sitting in her classroom when she noticed unusual movements outside. Villagers were passing by in large groups. She tried to ignore it, but the more she tried, the louder and more frequent the groups became. Curiosity got the better of her, so she stepped outside, closed her classroom door, and asked someone what was happening. "Have you heard? They say visitors have come from a faraway land looking for herbs," a woman replied. Normally, Kem wouldn't have been interested, but the mention of the words "a faraway land" intrigued her. "Where are they?" she asked, her eyes widening. The villagers told her they were at the palace, and without hesitation, Kem began to walk quickly towards it. When she arrived at the king's palace, she pushed through the crowd to get a better view. When she finally saw the visitors, her heart warmed. They were indeed from a distant place, unlike any visitors she had seen before. They were not the usual visitors who looked like them from neighboring communities, nor did they resemble the white men who had come years ago to preach religion. These visitors had smooth, clear skin with a fair tone. Their eyes were almond-shaped, giving them an exotic look that intrigued the villagers. Their hair was dark and straight, neatly styled, and they carried themselves with a quiet dignity and respect that impressed the villagers. Their attire was different as well, consisting of simple yet elegant clothing that was unfamiliar but intriguing. These visitors had traveled all the way from Korea in Asia to seek unique herbs found only in the eastern part of Nigeria, specifically in Osasai. Kem watched as the king officially welcomed the visitors and asked the villagers to make them feel at home. He introduced them by name, and though some villagers giggled at their foreign names, Kem did not. She had read about these people in her father's books and knew about their customs. She decided she would meet the visitors the next afternoon to introduce herself and offer her assistance to make their 7-month stay in Osasai fruitful. The following morning, Kem woke up with excitement. The day reminded her of the times her father would return from his long travels, eagerly to share all the knowledge he had gained. She decided to go into the forest to gather herbs to demonstrate her expertise to the visitors. All night, she rehearsed a few Korean phrases her father had taught her in the past. She giggled to herself as she remembered how eventful the night had been. Kem waltzed into the forest and began gathering herbs as quickly as she could. Once she was done, she started to make her way out, but suddenly she noticed a man on the other side of the forest. Though he couldn't see her, she recognized him immediately. He was one of the Korean visitors the king had introduced, and if her memory served her correctly, he was the leader of the group, and his name was Jinho. He seemed engrossed in his work, taking notes and examining herbs. Kem quickly hid behind a tree, watching him. She wanted to approach him and offer her assistance, but as she gathered her courage, she began to feel shy. She took several deep breaths, trying to master the strength, but it wasn't happening. She decided to leave the forest and stick to her plan of visiting them later. Maybe she felt shy because she hadn't expected to see him, but just as she was about to leave, her leg got tangled in a creeping vine, and she fell, letting out a loud scream. The noise alerted Jinho, and he quickly abandoned the herbs and rushed toward her. "Are you okay?" he asked, helping her up. Kem, unusually tongue-tied, just stared at him, thinking of how to offer her assistance. "English?" Jinho asked, interrupting her thoughts. Kem suddenly felt upset. Why would he speak to her in monosyllables? She straightened herself and replied, "Of course, I speak English." Jinho quickly apologized when he noticed her annoyance. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean it that way. I only learned to speak English 3 years ago." Kem felt ashamed of her reaction and apologized. He smiled back, claiming no offense. She introduced herself and volunteered to assist his team during their stay. "I am a teacher and very knowledgeable about herbal medicine. I'm sure I can help you, whether it's picking leaves, grinding them into powder, whatever you need." Jinho smiled as she spoke. "You are very expressive when you talk. You use your hands, your eyes, everything. It's wonderful to watch. It will be a pleasure working with you." And Kem was excited. They spoke a bit longer, introducing themselves properly. Then she remembered the herbs she had gathered to show him and his team. They were scattered on the ground from her fall. She bent down to gather them, and Jinho, noticing, helped her pick them up. He stopped at a yellow-colored herb. "I've been looking for this all morning. Did you know that when you mix it with bitter leaf, it cures a stomach ache?" he said excitedly. And Kem shared his excitement, happy she was already providing value, but couldn't help but share her thoughts on the yellow herb offer. "That's a good mixture, but I can assure you that it's not as potent as the Nchaka leaf. It will cure the pain in such a way that you'll forget you ever had it." And Kem said to him. Jinho frowned slightly, shaking his head. "I don't think so. I've been studying the yellow herb for years, and it's part of the reason I came all the way here. It's a cure for many illnesses." And Kem's eyes narrowed. "With all due respect, Mr. Jinho, I've lived in this village all my life, and I know our herbs. The Nchaka leaf has properties that surpass the yellow herb." Jinho's expression became serious. "With all due respect, Kem, I have dedicated my life to studying herbs. The yellow herb's benefits are scientifically proven. Science doesn't know everything." And Kem fired back, her voice rising. "Some things are known through tradition and experience. You can't dismiss that just because you haven't read it in a book." Jinho's jaw tightened. "I'm not dismissing your traditions, but you must understand that the yellow herb has been tested and its efficacy documented." They both stood there, clearly upset with each other, neither willing to back down. "Well, I just remembered that the kids I teach have a test coming up, so I won't be able to assist your team anymore because I'll be very busy," Kem said, picking up her basket and walking away. Jinho remained where he was, unapologetic. He refused to let someone who was versatile in many things tell him about something he had devoted his life to. A week passed, and Jinho began to settle into the village. He could often be found working diligently in a central location the king had provided. A large shed under the mango tree. Some village ladies swooned over him and his colleagues, while others remained loyal to their local men. Kem would occasionally pass by on her way to her classroom, and her eyes would lock with Jinho's before she would quickly look away, muttering to herself, "I'm not willing to work with a man who isn't willing to learn." One day during a heavy rainfall in Osasai, Kem was running late to her classroom. When she finally arrived, she saw Jinho interacting with the children, who were excited to have him around. "Hello," she greeted him politely. "I think you are in the wrong room." Jinho smiled and said, "I came looking for you. Remember, you told me you are a teacher? It wasn't hard to find you." "Kem," he began. "I've been thinking, it's okay to disagree. I'm sorry if I came off as headstrong. I guess I felt frustrated that something I've been working on all my life seemed to be false." Kem felt his frustration and replied, "It's not false. The yellow herb is indeed powerful, but there is something more potent. See it as a gift and explore what it has to offer." "I also apologize. I could have been kinder." They both laughed, breaking the tension. Jinho then asked, "Would you like to explore the Nchaka leaf together?" Kem agreed instantly, because every time she passed his workshop, she secretly longed to be there working alongside the team. Now she finally had the chance. Kem began to work with the team as they explored new herbs. She became quite close to Jinho, who ensured she knew she was an important member of the team. Her opinions always counted. Their conversations grew more personal. They shared stories and dreams beyond herbal medicine and often exchanged food. They marveled at the similarities between Korean kimchi and Igbo ugba, both fermented vegetable dishes. Most of the time, they would lounge under a tree eating jollof rice or bibimbap, which were both rice-based meals. They also taught each other bits of their languages. They would laugh at themselves whenever they got the pronunciations wrong. One day, in the workshop, a shocking visitor arrived. It was Urena, the princess of Osasai. Jinho went out to welcome her, and after a chat, he brought her in, introducing her to the team. "This is Princess Urena, and she will be working with us now." Everyone welcomed her, and work began as usual. Kem couldn't help but glance at Urena often. She had never seen the princess before, as Urena spent most of her time indoors, attended to by her maids. Many suitors from distant lands sought her hand in marriage, and Kem finally understood why. Urena was stunningly beautiful. Later in the day, Jinho found his way to Kem for one of their chats, but just as they settled down to discuss, Urena interrupted them. "Jinho, can you please show me the herbs you put together for joint pain?" she asked. He excused himself and followed the princess. Kem felt disappointed. Her conversations with Jinho had become the highlight of her day, but she consoled herself, thinking, "We can speak tomorrow and many other days." However, as days passed, Urena demanded more of Jinho's attention, even bringing lunch from the palace for them to share. Jinho tried his best to steal moments with Kem, sometimes waiting until evening to walk her home. One day, Kem waited for Jinho to walk her home as usual, but he didn't show up. As she walked home alone, she missed their conversations and wondered if Urena was with him. She finally admitted her feelings for him, but she knew it was of no use. He hadn't shown interest, and his stay in the village was not permanent. The next morning, as she stepped out to go to her classroom, Jinho was sitting outside, waiting for her. Kem blushed as she saw him. "I'm sorry I kept you waiting yesterday," he apologized. Kem nodded. "Was it Urena? She seems to want your company a lot," she instigated, but Jinho smiled gently. "It wasn't Urena. It was the village chief. He came to thank me for the sleeping herbs, and we got caught up in our conversation. And you, Kem, you notice everything, except how much I love your company." Kem shyly looked at him. "Have you not noticed how much I like you?" Jinho asked her. Kem looked at him firmly this time. "I am a grown woman. I do not sit around making assumptions." Jinho knew she was right. He had been waiting for the perfect time to tell her he liked her since they met in the forest, but he was afraid of scaring her away. "I really like you, Kem, and would love to court you," he said. Kem giggled and responded, "Well, You'll have to give me some time to think about it. Days passed, and Jinho waited patiently for Kem to give him a response. She eventually agreed to allow him court her. Her heart was sure he was the right person for her. As time passed, news quickly spread about Jinho and Kem. Out of jealousy, Urena stopped coming to the workshop, as her love interest clearly preferred someone else. The villagers, on the other hand, gossiped endlessly about the new couple. Let her enjoy it while it lasts. He will leave the village soon, and she will return to her big books, some jealous maidens would say. Kem and Jinho were unfazed by the whispers. They were fascinated by each other, and that was all that mattered. As their relationship grew stronger, Jinho knew he wanted to spend the rest of his life with Kem. So, he asked if she would consider marrying him. We can sail the world together and create wonderful memories, he said, in adding to his proposal. Kem frowned slightly. She knew their relationship was getting serious and probably headed toward marriage, but she was unwilling to leave her home. Her parents were buried there. The children she taught her culture her whole life was in Osasai. Jinho saw her expression and retracted his words. Or, we could set up our own home here in Osasai, the herbalist and the teacher, he joked. He couldn't afford to lose her, and if it meant staying in Osasai, he would. Kem objected, asking him not to sacrifice his life for her, but he was determined. To spend the rest of his life with her, I can always travel and come back to you when the need arises, he said. That sounded like a better balance for Kem, so she hugged him in agreement. Wedding preparations quickly began. The spinster, who nobody thought would ever be married, had finally found her better half. So maidens laughed at Jinho for refusing the younger maidens, but no one was as beautiful as Kem in his eyes. He loved every bit of her. But amongst all the villagers, there was no one angrier than Urena. Jinho was the first man she had intentionally sought after, and he had chosen a spinster over her. She was furious, filled with jealousy, and she knew exactly what to do to hurt him for rejecting her. 2 days before the marriage ceremony between Jinho and Kem, the town crier went around informing the villagers of new information from the palace. The king has demanded we preserve our culture. Henceforth, we the indigenous of Osasai will be allowed to marry from Osasai for a period of time. Failure to adhere to this rule will result in banishments, he announced. Urena was pleased. She narrated the issue to her father, the king, and asked him to issue the decree. The king loved his daughter so much that he decided to grant her request long enough to frustrate Jinho, which would result in his exit from the village. If Urena couldn't have Jinho, nobody else from Osasai would. Kem and Jinho were devastated by the news. They had to avoid being so close to each other to avoid problems with the king. But one thing was certain. Their relationship was over. Their hearts ached when they saw each other. Jinho knew he also had to leave soon and wanted to ask Kem to come with him, but he knew how much she loved Osasai. Kem, on the other hand, spent her time reading her father's books. She tried to take her mind away from how terrible she felt. One day, as she was cleaning her father's collections, she saw a map. She smiled warmly as she remembered her father's favorite words. Kem, there is so much to see in this world, he would say. Then he would trace his fingers to the map of Nigeria and point to the eastern parts. But you see, my dear, no matter where I go, my heart will always be here because of you and your mother. She jumped at the revelation. She had heard him say those things repeatedly, but now it made complete sense to her. She realized that her heart was with Jinho, and wherever he went, that would be her home. Kem ran to his workshop and pulled him out for a conversation. I will go with you, Jinho, she said. Jinho took her hands in his, a mix of relief and sadness in his eyes. Are you sure? This is your home, your life, he said, and she nodded. They went straight to the palace to declare their decision. Urena and 2 other chiefs were sitting in the king's court, conversing with the king when they arrived. Urena rolled her eyes in disgust when she saw them holding hands. Jinho addressed the king, thanking him for his hospitality, then informed them of their decision, which made the princess visibly upset. My father, are you going to let them get away with disobeying your orders? Banishment is not enough. This man and his group should not be allowed to leave with any herbs from Osasai, she said, and the king nodded in approval of his daughter's wishes. Kem turned to Jinho, trying to remove her hands from his because she knew the herbs were his life's work, and she feared he wouldn't trade them for a life with her. But she was wrong. Jinho held her tightly and assured the king that he would not leave with any of the herbs. He was determined to marry Kem. Kem felt a surge of pride and love for Jinho. She was further convinced that he was the man for her. They both left the palace, knowing nothing could be said against them now. When they got out, Kem said to him, "We'll start over together, Jinho. We'll find new herbs and continue your work. Together, we can overcome anything." Jinho nodded. He had no doubt in his heart, neither did he think he was making a mistake. 2 days later, Kem, Jinho, and alongside his team were ready to leave the village. People gathered to watch them, as well as Kem's students. She hugged them farewell, but one student hugged her more tightly, almost refusing to let go. It was Ada, the only female student in her class. "I'm going to be a teacher like you one day," Ada said to Kem. Kem's heart was warm. She was glad her time in the village had mattered. "Ada, you will make a fantastic teacher," she responded. Eventually, she boarded the ship with Jinho. As it sailed far away from Osasai, someone from the team came up to them and said, "We found several bags of the herbs we worked with at the bottom of the ship." Kem and Jinho both ran to see them. They carefully examined the herbs and found a letter. It was from the king. In the letter, he thanked Jinho for helping with his herbal concoctions and apologized for what had happened, explaining that as there were situations beyond his control. He also mentioned that Chief Ike had put in a good word for Jinho, thanking him again for the sleeping herbs. "As for Kem, our beautiful daughter of Osasai, in a year, I will lift the banishment and reverse the law. You will always be welcome here. May God bless your union." The king knew his daughter was spoiled brat, but he also didn't want to hurt her feelings, so he agreed to make a temporary decision to make Urena happy. Kem and Jinho hugged each other in excitement, happy they chose themselves, and so, with hearts full of hope and love, they set off to build a new life together, knowing that wherever they went, they were home. I hope this story serves as a reminder that people should not settle just because they have not found what they desire yet. Whether it's in relationships, careers, or general life decisions, whatever it may be, I pray that the Lord will grant your desires according to His will. Thank you for listening to this story today. It's quite different, but I hope you liked it. Please let me know what you learned in the comment section. If you enjoyed it, please like and share it with your loved ones. Until next time, bye.